I know it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, it's exciting to solve a problem that has been solved in 2,000 years. And not just about Judas, but everything connected to the life and death of Jesus. And yet I have this nagging feeling, I just got to be honest about this, there's a fat chance anybody cares about any of this. Right? But that's the world we live in. So how do you think I did in the last video? Not too shabby, right? I mean, it wasn't perfect. I muffed up some words here and there. I gotta admit that. But overall, I'm pretty okay with it. I'm satisfied. So I can live with it. Oh, and you know what I did right after I made that video? I had a sandwich and some cookies. I did. No, I didn't have any milk, but thank you for asking. So, Mark, the ambiguous evidence, all the evidence in Mark about Judas is ambiguous. Before I get to that, I know there's a couple of things I left out in the last video, and I just want to make them now. Oh, one other thing. I keep remembering things. Once I completely and thoroughly established the innocence of Judas, that he was a completely innocent man, falsely accused of being a traitor, once I established that, the world will be a better place, right? I mean, we'll all live harmoniously and happily ever after. Yeah, right. Okay. I'm just going to quickly go over what I did last time, very quickly. There were 4 Gospels, right? Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. That's the order they were written in. And traitor, devil, and thief, those are the 3 worst things any of the Gospels have to say about Judas. I mean, there's nothing worse. Those are the 3 worst things. And those 3 worst things don't make a case at all against Judas. And they don't make a case at all because they fail, not for 1, not for 2, but for 3 big reasons. And if you remember, traitor, devil, and thief, the 3 big reasons are, number 1, they all come from the last 2 Gospels. Mark and Matthew never called Judas a traitor, devil, or thief. So already that's a sign of a developing tradition. Secondly, they're comments made by the Gospel authors, Luke and John. They're not comments made by anybody talking within the Gospels. And comments made by the last 2 Gospel authors are pretty weak evidence. If we had evidence that somebody in the Gospel, somebody who knew Judas, had left a record behind that they said these bad things about him at or around the time it happened, that would be interesting evidence, but we don't have that. Third reason this evidence fails, traitor, devil, and thief, especially with regard to traitor and devil, is what do they amount to? They're just accusations. They prove that the accusations came to be made. They don't prove the accusations were true. They don't prove they were originally true. In any rational field of study, any rational field, anywhere in the world, it would be considered immoral and illogical to use an accusation to prove the truth of the accusation. Only New Testament scholars do this. What you really want, the accusation is worthless because it just proves the accusation came to be made. What you want to know is there a pattern of evidence outside the Gospels that would support this accusation or possibly defeat and undermine the accusation? That's what we're looking for, evidence outside the accusation. And Gospel scholars, historical Jesus scholars, whatever you want to call them, they could care less about any of this. And the third reason, that's the third reason. Accusation, right, that's the third reason. Because it's consistent with 2 hypotheses, the real guilt hypothesis and the slander hypothesis. How did Judas come to be called a traitor at Luke 6:16? He could have been an innocent person slandered as a traitor. So that accusation doesn't help us choose between the 2 hypotheses. Alright, I made this general point last time that the Gospel authors are so much better historians than modern scholars. But I forgot to show you in detail from the evidence I already presented how you can see that. I mean, take that demonization of Judas, for example. Do you know how easy it would have been for the Gospel authors, Luke and John, or Mark and Matthew, for any of them, to make their case better by inventing a quotation, for example? How easy it would have been for them to slip in a quotation that Peter said to Judas, "You're a bastard, you're a devil, get out of the group." Or if Peter said to one of his fellow disciples, after they took Jesus away, Peter says to his fellow disciples, "Can you believe that traitor Judas? We're going to have to kick him out." See, that would be interesting evidence. And they could easily have made up something like that, and they didn't do it. They refrained from doing it. And we'll see that with Mark too. All the evidence in Mark is ambiguous. He could easily have tipped something in a definite negative direction against Judas. He didn't do that. All the Gospel authors refrained from making up things to make their case against Judas better. And that's a hell of a lot more than you can say for modern Gospel scholars who are bent on misrepresenting the evidence to improve their case. So I'll stick by my statement that the ancient Gospel authors were far, far better historians than any modern scholars who insist on making the case better. The other thing is, all right. So if I'm so down on New Testament scholars, historical Jesus scholars, why am I putting up this video? Well, it's obviously not to reach them, because they made it very clear to me they have no interest in a rational discussion of the evidence. No, I'm looking for people outside the field of experts, outside the field of New Testament scholars. Could be literary critics, could be other writers, could be filmmakers, could be artists, could be any human beings who have an interest in the subject of history and memory, and in particular, how certain historical memories get erased because the evidence for them gets suppressed. If you have an interest in that, I'm begging you to take an interest in this. And as far as writers go, I'm thinking of particular people like Sarah Vowell, Francine Prose. How about Maira Kalman? Where are you, Maira Kalman, when I need you? Maybe Rachel Donadio, Laura Miller, perhaps Koki and Steve Roberts. Koki and her husband Steve. Congratulations on your new book, Our Haggadah, by the way. Maybe even Roger Rosenblatt. Any of these writers. If you have an interest in the subject of history and memory, I'm begging you. And if I could pick up this computer, I don't want to pick it up. But if I could pick it up and show you the space I have here, because I don't have any space. If I had the space to get on my knees and beg, I would do that. That's how important this subject is. Don't leave it to the experts who will just continue to mess it up. So that's why I'm putting up this video. And as for New Testament scholars, they've made it clear their motto is, the less we see, the more we know. Evidence? We don't need no stinking evidence. We're creative, man. We got vision. We got a priori reasoning. And that's what convicts Judas. That's all that convicts Judas. A priori reasoning. A priori assumptions, convictions, preconceptions. They use that to convict Judas and not actual evidence. The less we see, the more we know. It's outrageous. I mean, just think. In the 21st century, there are still scholars who think that demonization counts as evidence against Judas. It's bizarre. All right, let me get to Mark. Starting with the word that he uses, the verb that he uses to describe Judas's action, it's all ambiguous. There are three important Greek words we should know, and my pronunciation of these ancient Greek words is probably off. I apologize. I'll try to do the best I can. First, you have the Greek word prodidomi. That's the Greek verb for to betray. None of the Gospels use this word. None of them. You won't find it anywhere in the New Testament. The word that Mark uses and the other Gospel writers following suit is paradidomi, and that word means convey or deliver in a neutral sense, no connotation of betrayal. Prodotos is the Greek word for traitor, and that's used precisely once at Luke 6:16, and only proves the accusation came to be made and not whether or not it was actually deserved. So what about that word paradidomi? We owe a lot to William Klassen, who put this point on the map. But even a conservative scholar like Raymond Brown admits that it cannot be translated as betray. He still thinks, by the way, that Judas betrayed Jesus, but Raymond Brown insisted that paradidomi cannot be translated as betray. Now, some scholars would disagree. They would argue that it has a secondary meaning of betray. Okay, fine. I'm willing to make an assumption against the self-interest of my own argument. Let's assume betray is a secondary meaning of paradidomi. So if you're going to use a secondary meaning, support that. What's your evidence that allows you to do that? Do we have a very definite motive ascribed to Judas? No, we do not. Do we have any definite conflict between Judas and Jesus or between Judas and other disciples described anywhere in the Gospels? No, we do not. Do we at least have the very least you'd expect in any story of betrayal is, do we have any kind of a denunciation or castigation of Judas after the fact? No, we do not. So how is it sane to go from Mark is missing every detail of a story of betrayal to the conclusion, therefore Mark is telling the story of a traitor? All he tells us, by the way, is that that Judas got up and left the table and returned with authorities. Mark never says why he did it. He leaves that out. He says the priests were glad to receive Judas, but he never says why they were glad. And he records that comment about better for that man had he not been born, which everyone takes to mean something negative, but it's ambiguous because in ancient Hebrew, that could be applied to a person who suffered or endured a terrible fate, like, for example, being falsely accused of being a traitor. That would justify the comment, it were better for that man had he not been born. So why do we do this to Judas? Why? I mean, would you allow it to be done to someone that you know, to someone that you loved? I don't think so. So don't do it to Judas either. And I'll pick this up in the next video. Until then, amigos y compañeros.